Hello, and thank you for joining DigitalBC Livestream today. For those of you joining for the first time, welcome. My name is Jillian Carruthers, and I'm the Senior Executive Director of Digital Identity and Trust here in the Ministry of Citizen Services. Every month, we host a conversation about all things digital, taking topics from around the world to right here in British Columbia. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce Kate Tarling, joining us from across the pond this afternoon / a little bit late in the evening for Kate, but we're grateful that she's here for us. Kate helps leaderships and teams in large organizations develop the conditions and the practices for everyone to be able to deliver better on services for customers and for users. She does this through consulting, through training. She's an advisor to boards and executives. And she's held senior service, public sector service roles in UK government, as well as private sector. Kate is, of course, as many of you got the book, is the author of The Service Organization with my many sticky notes, just in case we need to pick on a specific point today, and has spoken as a guest lecturer at Harvard University, University College London, University of Toronto, and is a regular speaker at global institutions, national governments, and of course, this prestigious DigitalBC call today. Kate, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to join you all.
Well, let's start off a little easy here and just, why did you feel the need to write a book? And what is a service organization?
Yeah, two good questions. I think there's a lot of advice and guidance out there for making good products, making good services, how to form teams for kind of good digital delivery, and how to really understand the people that use your services. And in many places, there are already like great multidisciplinary teams starting to redesign services, make them work more digitally. But often, like the rest of the organization is all operating separately, the same as if nothing else has changed, as if that work is other. And like our organizations are typically organized into separate functions. So operations do their best with what they have, policy comes up with ideas, governance works however it works, planning and reporting and so on. No one's incentivized to look across the whole at how all of this is working, how we know whether our policy ideas will work when they get close to reality. So if we say like services help people to do or to achieve something where there's an outcome for the organization, but what people actually want to do doesn't neatly fit into a single team or function in organizations. Usually services tend to run across them. So to get better at this stuff, it requires that we work together, that we make decisions together, that we look at outcomes, we measure performance as a whole, and that we set up to be able to improve services. And there just wasn't any guides for how to do that stuff in large, complex organizations. It tends to be also a bit idealized. So the book was intended to have advice, examples, tools for how to do this stuff and how to create some of the culture and behavior that makes better services at scale. And it's got lots of practical examples from different public sector organizations so that we can and are learning together so that we can avoid mistakes of others that have happened before or accelerate our own journey. So and I guess a service organization to me is one that organizes itself and the work to deliver the services it provides in the most effective way, in the most efficient way, and to strive for more continuous improvement where it makes sense to. And that's in terms of policy outcomes, organizational outcomes, or for customers and users. So not just seeing itself as a set of separate functions or teams that carry out their bit, but how well it works overall.
Oh, that's awesome, and it's right on point. It really hits home for what we're doing and what we're seeing here in BC. I think in general, we've really tried to orient ourselves around work that sort of has that end-to-end service experience approach. We've called this out in our digital plan that was released last year. We've recently embedded digital code of practice components that have that continuous improvement, that mindset really embedded. But I would say it's an emerging capability here still. I think you nailed it on the head when you said there just wasn't that guide out there, and so you've helpfully provided that and with some practical examples. you talk about governance, and this has become a swear word for some people in our organization. So governance, whole service leadership, policy team strategy, lots of other important factors that we can't go fully into. But is there one that jumps out as a place to start for you?
Yeah, and to be fair, there's a lot in this book, and I don't expect everybody to be doing everything all at once, covering it all off at the same time. So yeah, just, you know, a good place to start is often to really understand the services your organization provides from the perspective of its external users, and from there start to look at how well things work or not. And that can include like being clear about what the job of the service is, like why it exists, what outcome is it meant to be delivering, where the issues are, and that could be issues for internal staff, it could be issues for users, it could be issues for people in the contact center, and then sort of start to form a view of what would it look like if it was all working well, or where are you having to do things you shouldn't need to. The Home Office is part of the government in the UK that deals with immigration, border control, passports and so on. And it has a really nice example of this that they've published. So they've listed out all their services, and it isn't a list of their policy names, it isn't a list of their operational functions, it's just a list of what people are trying to do. It's like visit the UK or kind of get help and support with sort of settling. One really common way into this, I guess, is to, you know, once you've got a sense of it, is to pick an end-to-end service, maybe one that's really important or costly, or where there's a lot of change already happening, and use that as a way to explore some of the other facets, like what might more end-to-end service leadership look like, what does performance look like, how we might sort of help pair service designers with people and sort of work our way through it. You'll learn a lot about what needs to change in the organization to support that kind of working, and start to grow kind of in-house experience as well. It's also true that sometimes you've already got a program of work underway, and you can sort of just join it and help to create the conditions for success. Yeah, exactly. And sort of help to turn it into end-to-end service work. And there's one brilliant example where there's an organisation that grants licenses to bioscience organisations and university researchers so that they're allowed to carry out certain kinds of scientific research. And it had a legacy licensing system for regulating that research. And it was assumed that the contract would be re-procured and that the same system would be used to fulfil the needs of this licensing service in future as it was being transformed. And now that was a massive leap, that assumption. But culturally, the team was used to this system being the thing that provides licensing. So it was so easy to just assume that that system will carry on being the thing and that it will serve the needs of this new improved service. But obviously there were huge issues with it too. So taking an approach that focuses on what's actually needed to deliver a good service, and like understanding the needs of people actually applying for licenses. So sometimes large organizations, sometimes individual researchers, really getting to grips with what was going on for operational staff. And on that basis, like recognizing that that technical system did not meet those needs. So it can mean challenging the assumption that we are delivering decent services when in fact we are not. And in this case, they put together like a team of operational people, policy people, digital and technology people to work together. They really spent a lot of time with people applying and working with these licenses. And over time, they've created a service that really does work for users, but they've also reduced the time and effort to process an application by 50%, while increasing customer satisfaction from 50%, well, less than 50% rather, to over 80%. So they've got themselves out of this legacy system, they've got a decent service, and in fact, some in the industry have suggested they raise the license fee to help keep that team in place because of the benefits they're seeing, and that's almost sort of wouldn't have been imaginable at the start of that work.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. I mean, it speaks to one of my other favorite things, which is having really good metrics to be able to benchmark and understand where your service is going and how you're performing too. But we don't have to raffle on that one. One of the things you said just really popped out to me about that reflection on maybe your service isn't necessarily performing the way that you think it is, and that not reflecting on the individuals that are running that service. Like it's not that they're doing anything wrong. They might be amazing and incredibly talented, but having that curiosity and that ability to question some of those assumptions is so important. Okay, in reading your book, I was like, what stood out to me was really how important it is that this isn't just about like executive governance. This isn't just leadership layer or wherever we're going to put things. This is about everyone. It's about, regardless of your level, your role, or where you are in the organization, making sure that you understand the organization you're part of. And I struggle a bit with that. Can you help me just define and understand why it's so important to know your organization?
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? It happens to everybody, including myself. When you've been working with an organization for long enough, you're so focused on what you do day to day, or the issues you're trying to tackle, or the help you're trying to give. You just don't have the time to kind of think, hang on a minute, how is everything that I'm doing contributing to the whole? So it's not down to anyone, it's what just happens in a large organization. And then why it's so important is that, I guess, public services in particular, although they help people, citizens, to achieve things or to do things, they are also like the main delivery mechanism for policy intent. And that is really why our organizations exist, to achieve outcomes in the real world. So a service could work and it could be joined up, and you could be doing sort of optimization work around sort of how forms work and things. But if it fails to achieve the policy intent at all, it's kind of pointless. It's kind of wasted. Like, you might be better not to have a service. So, like, as an example, the Driver Vehicle and Standards Agency in the UK, so they are responsible for ensuring that vehicles are safe to drive, roads are safe, drivers are as good as they could be. It's not just about how many tests can they carry out, how many people do they pass, how many contact centre calls have they handled. It's about balancing the trade-offs between safety and time and cost through services. So you've got the policy outcomes and intent, you've got, well, it can't be at any cost. There is a sort of budget working to this.
So always, yeah.
The job of the service is to kind of hold those things in balance and kind of see where things shift and look at demand. And those trade-offs are really important. And I think sometimes in thinking about how organization work, we forget that there are trade-offs. So it can't just be about one thing or another thing. It's those together. And you only manage what you measure. So if you only measure individual parts of those operation, like how many calls we've handled or how many tickets we've closed, it doesn't help you know anything about how it's working overall. And so for everybody to be on that same page about whatever I'm doing, whether my job is in the contact center, whether my job is in technology, whether it's sort of looking into policy ideas and working with ministers and so on, we have to have that same view of ultimately this is what we're trying to deliver. So all of our bits of work should be contributing to that whole. And there's an example in the book of the UK Passport Office. They share how they've developed kind of whole service metrics that have really helped to bring together all of the different teams and keep everyone on the same page about what we're trying to achieve together, so that kind of everyone's working a bit more closely. So I don't know, from now on, whenever I work with a new organization, the first thing I do is ask about the services, what they are, why do they exist, or I work it out for myself by kind of interpreting, just to sort of sense, what is this organization actually trying to do? And it's a really helpful way to bring everybody together.
I love it. We've got some questions coming in. We've got lots of questions coming in. So I'll kind of flip us back and forth here. And the one that's jumping out to me right now is just, could you share an example of an unexpected outcome or a ripple effect with an organization after implementing this service orientation or this type of, becoming a service organization?
Oh, that's a
positive
good question.
Ripple, negative ripple, your choice.
The thing that immediately comes to mind is, at the start we were talking about how some teams can feel a bit othered by digital ways of working, like it's not for them, or it's not involve them, or it's some strange, confusing thing. I think one of the principles of whole service working is to really bring really tightly policy and operations, and including frontline staff, including contact center staff, together with other people to help in that kind of service delivery. And I think we started to see a sort of strengthening with working with policy teams, at least in the UK and other places. That's been really great. I think to get much, much closer to operational staff has been an interesting result of this work, because you start to see operational staff who, rather than sort of saying, oh, you know, what is this? It's going to be another tool that we can't work with. It's like some old rubbish you're going to expect me to do our best with to kind of carry on supporting or take the hit or be blamed for bottlenecks and so on. Actually seeing those people realize that what it's like to do that iterative design process, where the very tools that they're using are getting better, where if they've got a problem one week, that there is a way to actually get that problem dealt with, prioritized, worked through. And that's a fundamentally different approach to, I think, how we've treated operations in the past. So I think that has been phenomenal. And suddenly you've got these really engaged people that feel like they matter, that feel like it's not good enough just to sort of make them try to make, you know, do the best they can with whatever they've been given. I think that has been a real kind of really valuable and significant shift in how organizations have been working.
Yeah, that's absolutely significant in ensuring that people feel empowered in that space, and that they're comfortable, and they're becoming the champions of that work, which is that's a really that was a good one. That was a good one. Okay, another question here is around leadership and driving and sustaining these changes. So I'm going to roll it together with your whole service concept of leadership. Can you tell us a bit about whole service leadership, what that means, and how we might start moving towards that in an organization? I guess why it's important.
Yeah. This is coming up a lot, like a lot of organizations, not just the ones that I happen to be talking to, but everywhere is sort of looking at how do we lead more horizontally across areas. And I guess a service is a service irrespective of functions, geographies, or channels. And there are lots of examples of services that transcend teams, organizations, ministries sometimes. But even in organizations with a single service, like moving to whole service leadership is quite challenging. And it means, or the reason why it's hard, I guess, is that it means sort of having end-to-end accountability for the entirety of operations, including change, including digital, including policy ideas. So it kind of goes against a lot of how organizations are typically structured. But that leadership has to be able to respond in whatever way to what they're seeing happening throughout the service. So they need the means to be able to do that by bringing that all together so that they can pursue an outcome. And sometimes it means, you know, the services of a size where that could be one person working across a lot of people. Sometimes the service is enormous and it needs to be like a group of people working collectively.
Right.
I think in the you might be familiar with some of the work on a service called Universal Credit here in the UK. It's the welfare support system. And in the really early days, it had leadership for each different part of it, each different channel. So there was leadership for operations, leadership for the job centres, leadership for the contact centres, leadership for the digital and online application forms, and so on and so forth. One of the most important decisions, and that's how the department had always done it. So it wasn't everyone was driving it particularly, it was just assumed that that is how it would work. And one of the most important decisions they made was to change that, to have a group of leaders working really close together as guardians of the quality of the whole service. And they were able to find ways to do that by starting small so that they could figure out how to work together. But the Passport Office has the same situation. It's a really large service. They've evolved their model of service leadership. They tried different things and that's not quite working. And they needed kind of multiple ones, because although it's theoretically one service, it's quite different according to different user groups. So they have sort of brought in service leaders to look at different kind of segments of people across that service. But really, I guess in terms of leadership, it means being really clear about the outcome, helping teams to prioritize, so being really clear about the sort of the imperative that should be driving work and performance as a whole, and then involving people with the power to challenge. So whether that is the minister, the chief executive, some organizations have formed kind of service boards to help where it's working across those boundaries, so where you've got kind of such distinct things happening, having a service board or committee that's got some kind of teeth and some power and some sort of budgetary responsibility can help kind of drive or encourage or support. Anyway, this cross-organisation working, cross-organisation leadership is really hard, but it comes down to quite bold decisions and good intentions. And of course, there are examples of how it doesn't work so well that we can draw on to.
I'm sure there's a few of those ones. The guardians of quality and whole service, that's a really cool thing to think about. And I really like, of course, that bold decisions. There's just that willingness to be able to do some of those things.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one around what's the best tip you have for engaging groups or people who are resistant to participating in this way, especially when you really want, like, you genuinely want to understand their perspective and you're coming at it from a place of curiosity.
And I think that is exactly the right approach. So, you know, people, we all have our reasons for the positions that we hold, or reticence for doing something or looking into something. So, you know, assume that there is a really valid reason why somebody isn't wanting to engage, or doesn't think this is a good idea, or has a different idea that seems in conflict. So I think talking to people kind of one-to-one, finding out what's actually happening, what's going on, and for them kind of in and amidst that, what isn't working so well. So I think part of it is just approaching with real humility. So although we've got good ideas, we've seen things working, we've got some experience about this stuff, you know, nobody wants someone to come in and say, here are all the ways in which you're, you know, this is the way that you should have been doing it all along. Like, no, that approach doesn't work anywhere in any relationship. So just talking to people, finding the really good example of, you know, if it's a particular profession who isn't into it, if it's a particular team or particular function, finding the person who can best articulate what's actually going on for them, what their fears are. And it's in experience, like, there are some kind of common reasons, and that is your clue for how to make it all right, like how to help support that person in the thing that they're worried about, or in the thing that they're trying to progress, or how to help align the thing that they've got in their minds with what you're doing. So yeah, find individuals and then try to figure out together how you might approach things in a way that kind of does work for them, I think.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think the summary from what I'm hearing too is this is hard. This isn't easy. It's not simple. It's not quick. It takes that level of interest and that level of effort to really start to see these types of shifts. Okay, this is kind of flowing together here. Might be some of what you just said will fit with this, but talking about how you navigate resistance or inertia inside these, like, large organizations, and advocating for this fundamental change to services and operational practices, those types of things where you end up prioritizing services over, say, maybe a specific product or a specific component of. Any thoughts on that one?
I think I was thinking of an example, and I think it's quite common that you end up in a sort of position as if you're sort of trying to make an emotional argument for why it should be about better services, or like an ethical argument that, you know, it's the right thing to do. And it's really hard for the people that kind of don't agree. It's somewhat hard to kind of move on from there, because you both just have sort of different value positions. So one of the things to do is to make it very clear cut, the business case behind the things that you are seeing and saying. So for one of the reasons why I think and talk about service performance so much isn't so much because I'm obsessed with metrics, but it really is because it helps cut through. I'm a little bit obsessed, but because it helps cut through that, well, we just should do it, or services are the right thing, into this is the situation. This service costs us this much to run. We think that there's around, you know, 40% of the calls we take are because things aren't clear, or things aren't, you know, things haven't been made clear, or people are doing the wrong thing, or people are failing to do the right thing. This is what we're trying to achieve with the service. If we can improve those things by 20%, 30%, 10%, this is the size of the prize. It is worth us trying to bring some things together to figure out what we can do. So you sort of make it less subjective and just more objective about this, the case for prioritizing where we focus on things, I think. And because a lot of where services go wrong and add cost is to do with handoffs, is to do with barrier silos and so on. So there's a real compelling business case, and like in many examples, this approach helps to improve the overall effectiveness, the overall efficiency, and so that can help have the conversations that can help get over inertia. Not in all cases, though. For some people, this is so alien and so different to what, it's sort of unimaginable, that just until they've been part of a team doing this stuff, seeing the actual benefits for themselves, or being part of user research, so understanding what's really going on and going out to hear calls in the contact center, sometimes it takes that personal experience to change. But there are usually ways around it at different levels depending on who you're working with.
Yeah, it's that multi-pronged approach that I'm hearing the theme of. Try this and maybe this and then maybe that, and becomes a bit of a patience game, and like we said, showing up with some curiosity as you go forward.
Yeah.
I think I have time for one more here. So this one might be interesting. It's from someone who's asking about how does the service design space work better with the policy space, and particularly having challenges deciphering some of the policy as it relates to some of the more digital technical pieces, and translating those things together. Any tips for how to kickstart that?
There are some really nice examples of sort of blended teams that are forming now with policymakers and service designers and potentially user researchers in the same team at really early stage when policy is being formed. So if there is any opportunity, there's sort of some change coming up or some policy ideas thinking, trying to get on top of that and trying to sort of make available folks that can kind of help people work through, help facilitate things, and just be sort of another subject matter expert that is part of that policy making process. So can you start by sort of spotting an opportunity as one? In a more, to your point, kind of different levels, part of it is around, or part of the work is around creating better services. So that's an example. Where is something being formed? Get in there earlier on and be helpful. The second bit is kind of creating the conditions for and the culture for good services. So in a more kind of systemic approach, if you note that ideas come from policy teams, there's some sort of handover to delivery, it's not clear whether the idea is going to work or not, but it's too late now, it's just become a thing and it's got legs and it's got momentum and you can't really stop it even if you're worried about it. Getting on top of the flow of work across an organization, and looking at, okay, where does an idea go? What kind of forums are involved? How might we bring to bear, get that sort of change the relationship between service design and policy making, and actually design a flow of work to really encourage that, bringing people together, thinking about the service before the policy idea has been enacted, thinking about ways to test and learn before it's gone too far. So one is if there's a team, kind of work with it. Another is work with the flows of work and in part the governance cycles around it to kind of help introduce opportunities for how policy making works to change and be much, much closer with service design and delivery.
I love that. And that is a great way to end us, because we have, as always, run out of time. So anything that we have left in the questions, which there's a few there, we'll hit on the podcast, and we have a couple others to go at. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone. Have a great evening, Kate.